The small blue-white planet called Earth had just begun to stretch its wings beyond its solar system when the vast Zentari Empire took notice. For thousands of years, the Zentari had ruled the stars with an iron grip. They were tall beings with pale blue skin, 4 arms, and eyes that shined like small suns. Their technology was hundreds of years ahead of what humans had created. In their 30 centuries of expansion, they had never met a species that could truly challenge them. Captain John Matthews stood on the bridge of the exploratory vessel Northern Star, watching as his crew prepared for the final approach to the planet in the Tau Ceti system. At 42, John had deep smile lines around his eyes and short brown hair with touches of gray at the temples. He was known for his calm thinking even when things went wrong. "Final checks complete, Captain," said Lisa Hartman, his second-in-command. She was younger than John by a decade, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and quick hands that could fly across the control panels faster than anyone else on the ship. "Take us in, nice and easy," John ordered. "Remember, we're just setting up a research outpost. Nothing fancy." The Northern Star moved smoothly into orbit around the rocky planet below. It looked much like Mars, but with more water, enough to support the research team that would study it for the next 2 years. "Scan complete, sir," called out Ben Harris from the science station. "No signs of intelligent life or claimed territory. Markers. Looks like we found ourselves a nice quiet corner of space." John nodded with satisfaction. "Tell the ground team to prepare for landing. I want boots on the surface within the hour." None of them knew that silent eyes were watching. High above, hidden by technology humans couldn't yet detect, a Zentari scout ship recorded everything. On the massive Zentari command ship, Eternal Dominion, Supreme Executor Kraz Tool received the scout's report with mild interest. He was old. Even by Zentari standards, his once bright blue skin now faded to a pale cyan. Gold rings adorned each of his forearms, marking his many victories. "Another primitive species leaving its cradle," he remarked, looking at the holographic images of the human ship. "How many worlds have they claimed?" "Just this one beyond their home system, Supreme Executor," replied the intelligence officer. "They call themselves humans and have only achieved faster-than-light travel in the last 30 years. Kraztul made a sound that might have been a laugh. "They are infants playing among giants." Admiral Vikra, who had served in 17 expansion campaigns, studied the images more carefully. Unlike most Zentari military leaders, she had risen through the ranks by being thoughtful rather than just ruthless. Her dark blue skin bore scars from battles where she had chosen to lead from the front, not the rear. "I would suggest caution. Supreme Executor," she said, her voice measured. "Our initial scans show unusual neurological patterns in these humans. They seem to process stress and threats differently than other species we've encountered." General Dorvan snorted in derision. He was young for his rank, having earned his position through political connections rather than skill. "They have fewer than 20 ships capable of leaving their system. Their weapons are basic energy projectiles and chemical explosives. They would be lucky to damage even one of our scout ships." Kraztul waved a hand dismissively. "Have the diplomatic corps make contact. Offer them the standard terms. If they show wisdom, they may serve the Empire usefully." Admiral Vikra looked again at the scans. Something about these humans bothered her, but she couldn't put it into words. "Perhaps we should study them longer before making contact." "The decision is made," Kraztul said firmly. "The Tau Ceti system has valuable mineral deposits that would benefit the Empire. We will claim it, with or without their cooperation." Back on the planet's surface, Dr. Susan Wright led the first research team as they set up environmental monitoring stations. The sky above was a deep purple rather than Earth's blue, and the gravity was slightly stronger, making everyone move, with careful steps. "This is perfect," she said, brushing her blonde hair back under her helmet. "The soil samples show excellent mineral content. We could establish a permanent colony here within 5 years." Her assistant, Carlos Rodriguez, looked up from his data pad. "The preliminary scans show unusual energy readings about 12 kilometers east. Want to check it out tomorrow?" Before Susan could answer, all their communication devices activated at once. "This is Captain Matthews. Everyone returned to base camp immediately. We have a situation. Susan frowned. John never sounded worried, but there was tension in his voice that put her on edge. Pack it up, everyone, she ordered. Something's wrong. When Susan's team arrived back at the base camp, they found John standing with several officers, all staring at a large holographic image, floating in the center of the command tent. It showed a ship that looked nothing like human design, all smooth curves and glowing blue lines, at least 5 times larger than the Northern Star. It just appeared 20 minutes ago, John explained. Came out of nowhere. Our sensors didn't detect any approach. Have they made contact? Susan asked. As if in answer, the hologram changed to show a being with blue skin and 4 arms. Its eyes glowed with an inner light that seemed to look through them rather than at them. People of Earth, the being said in perfect English, I am diplomatic emissary Zexnar of the Zentari Empire, rulers of 3,000 systems and protectors of galactic order for 30 centuries. Your presence in this system has been noted. This world falls within imperial borders and is hereby claimed for the Empire. John stepped forward. We had no knowledge of any prior claim to this system. Our scans showed no signs of sentient life or territorial markers. The Zentari smiled, showing teeth that were too sharp to be friendly. Your ignorance is expected and forgiven, humans. The Empire extends an offer of protection and guidance. You will withdraw from all systems beyond your home world and accept status as a protected species under Imperial law. In time, you may earn the right to limited exploration under our supervision. The tent fell silent. And if we decline this generous offer? John asked carefully. The smile disappeared from the Zentari's face. Then you will be deemed hostile and dealt with accordingly. The Empire does not tolerate threats to galactic stability. The glowing eyes narrowed. You have 48 Earth hours to begin evacuation of all extrasolar holdings. Our diplomatic vessel will arrive at your homeworld to receive your formal submission. The hologram vanished. Carlos was the first to break the silence. They can't be serious. They expect us to just give up everything we've worked for? Susan looked at John. What do we do? John's face was grim as he activated the emergency communication link to Earth. We warn everyone, and then we prepare. President Laura Kelly sat alone in the Oval Office, staring at the report that had just arrived from the Tau Ceti mission. Outside her window, the Washington Monument stood tall against the night sky, a reminder of past struggles for freedom. Her military advisors had been clear. If the scans of Zentari technology were accurate, humanity stood no chance in open warfare. The logical choice was to accept the terms, buy time, and hope for diplomatic solutions. But Laura had studied history before entering politics. She knew what happened to cultures that submitted to colonial powers. First came restrictions, then exploitation, and finally, the slow death of everything that made them unique. Her phone rang. It was Alan Parker, Secretary of Defense. Madam President, the United Space Coalition is assembled and waiting for your decision. Laura took a deep breath. Tell them I'm on my way. She paused. And Alan, tell them to start activating our contingency plans, all of them. You know what this means, Alan said quietly. I do, she replied. If these Zentari want war, we'll give them one they'll never forget. As she walked toward the Situation Room, Laura knew the next few hours would change the course of human history. Humanity was about to face its greatest challenge, but if there was one thing humans had always been good at, it was surviving against the odds. The Zentari expected a quick war. They had fought 100 such battles against new species in the past 500 years. None had lasted more than a few days. Commander Pax-4 was given just 12 warships for what the High Command called a pacification mission. It was more than enough, they thought, to bring these humans to their knees. Paxivore stood proudly on the bridge of his command ship, the Imperial Fist. He was younger than most commanders, his blue skin still bright and unmarked by age. This human conflict would be his chance to prove himself worthy of higher rank. All ships report ready, Commander, said his first officer. We will reach the human colony on Mars in 6 hours. Excellent, Paxivore replied. Make sure all weapons are at full power. I want this done quickly and cleanly. He looked at the holographic display showing the human defenses around Mars. 6 small ships and 3 orbital platforms. It was almost funny how weak they were. Such primitive technology, he said with a smile. This will be over in 3 hours. Lieutenant, Commander Frank Morrison didn't smile as he looked at the approaching Zentari fleet. At 36, Frank had spent most of his life in space. His dark skin was marked with small scars from his years of service, and his black hair was cut short in military style. The defense platform, Aegis, was his command, one of only 3 protecting the 2 million people living in the Martian domes. Below, "They're coming in fast," said his executive officer, Linda Green. She was 10 years younger than Frank, with red hair tied back in a tight bun. 12 ships, all larger than anything we have. Frank nodded. Send the evacuation order to all civilian areas near potential landing zones. Move all non-essential personnel to the deep shelters. Linda looked at him with worried eyes. Sir, we can't win this fight. We're outnumbered and outgunned. Frank turned to face the entire bridge crew. We don't need to win, he said in a calm voice. We just need to make them bleed. He pointed to the tactical display. The Zentari expect us to form a defensive line, like every textbook says we should, so we're not going to do that. His finger traced a path through the asteroid belt that circled Mars. We're going to use what we have, knowledge of our own system. Captain Way, he called to the screen showing the captain of the USS Defiant. Take your ships into the asteroid belt. Use the rocks for cover and hit-and-run attacks only. Yes, sir, replied Captain Way, but that leaves the platforms exposed. Frank smiled for the first time that day. That's exactly what I want them to think. The Zentari attack began exactly as planned. Their 12 warships moved in perfect formation, their energy shields glowing faintly blue against the blackness of space. Their first volley destroyed one of the human ships that had been too slow to reach the asteroid belt. Commander Paxivore watched with satisfaction. Target those defense platforms next. Once they're gone, the colony will have no choice but to surrender. The massive Zentari ships turned their weapons toward the orbital platforms. Energy beams lashed out, hitting the Aegis platform squarely, but instead of exploding, the platform seemed to absorb the energy. What happened? Paxivore demanded. Fire again. Before his gunners could obey, small objects began to emerge from the platform, hundreds of them, each no bigger than a small car. Mining drones, his tactical officer reported with confusion. Primitive machines used for extracting minerals from asteroids. Paxivore laughed. This is their defense? Send a single fighter squadron to destroy them. The Zentari fighters moved to intercept the swarm of mining drones, but as they closed in, the drones suddenly changed direction, heading straight for the fighters at increasing speed. They're on collision courses, shouted the tactical officer. The first drone hit a Zentari fighter and exploded with surprising force, destroying both machines, then another and another. The small explosions began to fill space around the Zentari formation. They've turned their mining equipment into weapons. Paxivore realized, his confidence fading for the first time. From within the asteroid belt, the 5 remaining human ships darted out in unexpected patterns, firing their simple weapons at the same spot on one of the Zentari warships. Individually, the shots did little damage, but concentrated on one area, they began to weaken the shields. Spread out and destroy those ships, Paxivore ordered. 3 of his warships broke formation to chase the humans into the asteroid belt. It was exactly what Frank Morrison had been waiting for. Detonate the charges, he ordered. Throughout the asteroid belt, explosive charges that had been placed years ago as part of mining operations suddenly activated. They didn't target the Zentari ships directly. They didn't need to. The explosion sent hundreds of asteroid fragments hurtling in all directions, creating a deadly storm of rocks. The Zentari ships, built for open space combat, found themselves trapped in a cloud of fast-moving debris that hammered their shields from all sides. By the end of the first day, the battle was not going as the Zentari had expected. 2 of their warships had been lost, one destroyed by the asteroid field, Another crippled when human ships concentrated fire on its engines and then rammed it with unmanned cargo vessels loaded with explosives. Commander Paxvor could not believe what was happening. How are they doing this? They should have surrendered by now. The second day brought even more unusual tactics from the humans. They released radiation into space that confused Zentari sensors. They used their knowledge of Mars' unusual magnetic fields to hide their movements. The remaining defense platforms revealed hidden weapons that no one had detected. By the third day, the Zentari had destroyed all 3 defense platforms and 4 of the 6 human ships, but at a terrible cost. 3 Zentari warships had been destroyed, and 5 more had suffered serious damage. When Mars finally fell, the colony domes were empty. Under Frank Morrison's orders, the colonists had escaped through underground tunnels to hidden shelters. Deep in the Martian canyons, on the Zentari homeworld, Supreme Executor Krastul received the news of the battle with cold fury. Commander Paxvor had been executed for his failure, his body ejected into space as a warning to others. 3 days to subdue a primitive colony? 3 ships lost against their pathetic defenses? Krastul's voice was quiet, but filled with rage. This is unacceptable. General Dorvan, who had promised an easy victory, now looked nervous. It was unexpected, Supreme Executor. But we have learned from this. The next attack will succeed quickly. Admiral Vikra, who had warned of caution, spoke carefully. I believe we should reconsider our approach. These humans fight differently than other species. Enough, Krastul interrupted. I will not have the mighty Zentari Empire embarrassed by primitives. War Master Thulgrak will take command. He will deploy 100 ships for the next attack. He turned to Vikra. Your caution borders on cowardice, Admiral. You are dismissed from the War Council. As Vikra left the council chamber, she wondered if the Empire was making an even bigger mistake. On Earth, Defense Secretary Alan Parker stood before the United Space Coalition, a group of military leaders from all nations. The loss of Mars had been painful but not unexpected. The Martian Defense Force bought us something precious, he told them. Time, and they taught us that the Zentari can bleed. He activated a holographic display showing a new battle plan. I am implementing Protocol Hydra, effective immediately. If the Zentari want our surrender, they'll have to earn it planet by planet, life by life. The room was silent as the military leaders studied the plan. This isn't about winning conventionally, Alan continued. It's about making victory so costly that the Zentari decide we're not worth the effort. He didn't say what everyone in the room knew, that millions would die before this war was over. But against an enemy that wanted to take everything, there was no choice but to fight with everything they had. 6 months into what they had called a quick subjugation, the Zentari Empire faced an uncomfortable truth. Their mighty war machine had secured only 3 human colonies, and the cost had been far higher than anyone had expected. War Master Thulgrak stood before the Imperial Senate, his massive frame tense with controlled anger. Unlike most Zentari, Thulgrak had cybernetic enhancements covering half his body, the result of injuries from past campaigns. His left eyes glowed red, instead of the natural Zentari gold. The human resistance continues to be problematic, he admitted, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. They refuse to meet our forces in open battle where we could crush them easily. Instead, they hide, they ambush, they sacrifice their own structures to damage our ships. A senator leaned forward. You have lost 27 warships to these primitives? How is this possible? Thulgrak's mechanical hand crushed the edge of the podium he stood behind. They do not fight like a civilized species. They have no honor, no proper military doctrine. From the back of the chamber, Admiral Vikra watched silently. She had been removed from the War Council months ago, but her rank still allowed her to observe Senate meetings. Now, she was being summoned back. After the session, Supreme Executor Krastul approached her. Age had further paled his blue skin, and worry lines had deepened around his glowing eyes. It seems your caution was warranted, Admiral, he said quietly. The The human campaign is becoming expensive. Vikra kept her face neutral, though inside she felt a grim satisfaction. How may I serve the Empire, Supreme Executor? You will analyze all battle reports from the human front and provide a complete assessment. I want to know why these creatures fight as they do, and how we can break them. On the colony world of New Eden, Major Samantha Hayes crouched in the undergrowth of the dense forest, watching as a Zentari patrol passed by. At 34, Sam had once been a biology professor specializing in forest ecosystems. Now she used that knowledge to keep her resistance fighters alive. They're using heat scanners today, whispered Gary Wright, her second in command. The former police officer had a talent for understanding enemy tactics. They're learning. Sam nodded. Pass the word. Activate the cooling packs and stay in the water paths. Around them, 50 human fighters prepared to move. They wore suits lined with cooling technology that had originally been designed for desert exploration. It lowered their body temperature, just enough to blur the Zentari scanners. For 3 months, Sam's fighters had been tormenting the Zentari forces that had taken over New Eden's main settlement. They couldn't win a direct fight against the aliens' superior weapons, but they could make occupation costly. Tonight we hit the fuel depot, Sam told her team leaders when they gathered in the hidden underground bunker that served as their base. They've doubled the guards, but they still don't understand how the forest works at night. One of the younger fighters raised his hand. Major, we captured a Zentari communication device last week. They're bringing in more forces, a lot more. Sam's face showed no fear, though she felt it inside. Then we need to make sure they regret it. That night, as New Eden's 3 moons rose, Sam's team moved silently through the forest. The native trees grew quickly in the humid climate, already reclaiming areas that had been cleared during the initial Zentari attack. The alien fuel depot glowed with artificial light, surrounded by guards in powered armor. The Zentari had cleared 100 meters of forest around their base, thinking it would prevent surprise attacks. They didn't understand that the trees themselves could be weapons. Ready the sap charges, Sam whispered into her communication device. Throughout the forest, her fighters attached small devices to certain trees, a native species that stored highly flammable sap during the dry season. The devices were designed to extract and pressurize the sap. Fire team in position, came Gary's voice. Sam waited until the Zentari guard patrol reached the exact right spot in their rounds. Now, the devices activated simultaneously, spraying pressurized tree sap in high arcs over the cleared zone. Before, the Zentari could understand what was happening. The second team fired incendiary arrows into the sap streams. The night erupted in walls of fire that burned blue and green from the chemicals in the native sap. The flames weren't just for show. They burned hot enough to damage the Zentari armor and created a thick smoke that blocked their vision sensors. In the confusion, Sam's main attack team rushed from a different direction, using the smoke as cover. They planted explosives on the fuel containers and retreated before the Zentari could organize a response. The resulting explosion lit up the night like a new sun. When a Zentari patrol finally captured 3 human fighters 2 days later, they expected to gain valuable intelligence. Instead, the captured humans activated neural implants that erased strategic knowledge from their own minds. The Zentari medical officer assigned to extract information was frustrated. They've deliberately damaged their own brains rather than reveal information, he reported to the local commander. I've never seen such behavior in any species. In space, similar patterns were emerging. Commander Nicole Carter of the USS Defiant used what her crew called the Lazarus Protocol. When her ship was damaged in battle, she would shut down all systems and release debris to make it appear destroyed. The Zentari would move on, and then hours later the Defiant would power up again and strike from behind. They think like machines, Nicole told her officers. They expect certain responses, certain behaviors. When we don't follow their expectations, it confuses them. Nicole was only 31, younger than most ship commanders. Her quick promotion had come after the deaths of many senior officers in the early days of the war. Her ship had been destroyed 3 times according to Zentari battle reports, yet here they were preparing to attack again. The supply convoy will pass through the Theta sector in 6 hours, she told her crew. We'll power down now and drift. When they pass, we hit their rear guard, then disappear again. Her tactical officer looked concerned. Engine core is at 34%, Captain. If we power down, we might not be able to restart. Nicole nodded. That's a risk we'll take. The colony on Titan needs those supplies more than we need a working engine. At the Imperial Science Directorate, Chief Researcher Dalcon studied human physiology and psychology. He was older than most Zentari scientists, with skin that had faded to almost white. His forearms moved constantly, adjusting instruments and making notes. Fascinating, he muttered as he examined the brain scans of captured human soldiers. Their threat response doesn't follow any pattern we've seen before. His assistant looked up from a different set of data. How so, Chief Researcher? In most species, extended exposure to danger triggers surrender responses. Survival instincts eventually overcome fighting instincts. Dalcon pointed to the human brain scans. But in humans, continued threat seems to enhance their aggression. The longer they fight, the more determined they become. He compiled his findings into a report for the High Council. The conclusion was disturbing. These humans do not fight like a species trying to survive. They fight like one trying to win. Admiral Vikra presented her own findings to Supreme Executor Kraz-Tul after reviewing all battle reports from the front. We have critically underestimated these humans, she stated bluntly. They have adapted 16 different types of their own technology to combat our forces. They sacrifice their own safety for tactical advantage. They destroy their own resources rather than let us capture them. She pulled up holographic images showing human resistance tactics across different worlds. But most concerning is this: they are learning. Each engagement with our forces teaches them more about our weaknesses. The longer this war continues, the more dangerous they become. Kraz-Tul's golden eyes narrowed. What do you suggest, Admiral? We have two options. Commit the full might of the Empire to crush them completely, which would require at least 5 times our current deployed forces, or... She paused, knowing her next words bordered on treason. We consider a negotiated peace while we still hold the advantage. The Supreme Executor was silent for a long moment. Prepare a battle plan for full deployment. The Zentari Empire does not negotiate with primitives. As Vikra left the chamber, she wondered if the Empire was making its final and greatest mistake. After a year of defensive operations, the people of Earth prepared for something that seemed impossible just months ago: a counterattack against the mighty Zentari Empire. In a hidden laboratory deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. William Grant worked tirelessly with a team of scientists. At 58, Will had gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too little sleep. Before the war, he had been working on quantum physics theories that most considered impractical. Now those theories were humanity's best hope. Run the simulation again, he told his team, staring at the holographic display showing the inner workings of Zentari shield technology. For months, they had been studying debris collected from damaged Zentari ships, trying to understand how their seemingly impenetrable shields worked. Beside him, Dr. Layla Patel adjusted the parameters. The young quantum physicist had been his student before the war. The frequency modulation is the key, she said. Their shields don't just block physical objects, they exist partly in another dimension. Will nodded. Which means if we can create a weapon that operates on the same dimensional frequency, we can pass right through them. Layla finished his thought. The simulation ran again, this time showing a human weapon successfully penetrating a Zentari shield. The entire lab fell silent as the results displayed across their screens. It works, Will whispered. Then louder. It works. He turned to the military observer who had been watching silently from the corner. Tell Admiral Daniels we're ready. Admiral Eric Daniels stood on the bridge of the USS Vanguard, the largest ship humanity had ever built. At 62, Eric was older than most active commanders, with silver hair and a face weathered by decades of service. The Vanguard had been under construction before the war started, originally designed as an exploration vessel. Now it led a fleet of 50 ships, every combat-capable vessel humanity could muster. Status report, he ordered as the fleet prepared to jump to the Alpha Centauri system. His executive officer, Commander Maria Diaz, responded crisply. "All ships report ready, Admiral. The new quantum penetrator weapons have been installed on 37 vessels. The remaining ships will provide support and distraction." Eric nodded. Alpha Centauri had been one of the first human colonies to fall to the Centauri. Now it served as their main forward base, supporting operations throughout human space. Taking it back would be a bold move, perhaps too bold. "Send the final message to Earth," he ordered. "We jump in 15 minutes. He didn't say what everyone was thinking, that if this failed, Earth would have no defense left. Maria hesitated, then asked the question many were wondering. "Do you think Dr. Grant's weapons will actually work, sir?" Eric gave her a small smile. "They'd better. Otherwise, this will be a very short battle." The human fleet arrived in the Alpha Centauri system, using a new jump technique developed by studying Centauri technology. Instead of appearing at the system's edge as expected, they emerged just 50,000 kilometers from the Centauri base. On. The Centauri command ship War Master Thulgrak was stunned by the humans' audacity. "They dare to attack us directly, with only 50 ships?" His cybernetic eye glowed brighter with anger. "Destroy them all!" The Centauri fleet of 80 warships moved to engage, their formation perfect, their tactics following the same battle, doctrine that had won them 1,000 victories. But this time something was different. As the first Centauri energy weapons fired, the human ships didn't try to evade. Instead, they activated strange new devices that created swirling, purple-tinged fields around their hulls. The Centauri weapons fire passed through these fields, emerging on the other side with altered properties that allowed them to penetrate Centauri shields. On the vanguard, Admiral Daniels watched as their first volley struck home. "It's working," he said, allowing himself a moment of hope. "All ships, concentrate fire on their command vessels." The human fleet moved in an unusual formation that the Centauri computers couldn't recognize or predict. Some ships deliberately took hits to allow others to get into better firing positions. It was a tactic that sacrificed the few for the success of the many, something the hierarchy-obsessed Centauri would never consider. For the first time, Centauri ships began to fall to human weapons in significant numbers. War Master Thulgrak couldn't believe what he was seeing. 7 of his ships had already been destroyed and a dozen more were reporting shield failures. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Their technology was primitive just months ago." His tactical officer looked up from the battle display, his face showing confusion. "They've adapted our own shield technology against us. They're using dimensional phasing to bypass our defenses." Thulgrak's rage boiled over. "Impossible. No species has ever reverse-engineered our technology so quickly." But the evidence was undeniable, as another Centauri warship exploded under concentrated human fire. "Deploy the Starhammer," Thulgrak ordered suddenly. His officers looked at him, in shock. "The Supreme Executor has not authorized its use against potential subject species," one reminded him. "I don't care. I will not be defeated by primitives." Thulgrak's voice rose to a roar. "Deploy it now and target their colony on Nova Terra." The officers hesitated but obeyed. From the largest Centauri ship, a massive weapon emerged, the Starhammer, capable of creating a controlled nova that could destroy an entire planet. It was a weapon so terrible that the Empire had strict rules about its use, forbidding it against species that might become useful subjects. But Thulgrak was beyond caring about rules. On the vanguard, sensors detected the new threat immediately. "Admiral," reported the science officer, "they're deploying some kind of superweapon. Energy readings are off the charts." Admiral Daniels studied the tactical display. "They're aiming at Nova Terra, 12 million colonists." He made a quick decision. "All ships, new target, concentrate everything on that weapon." But even as the human fleet turned to engage the new threat, they could see it was too late. The Starhammer was charging, its power growing exponentially. "We'll never reach it in time," Maria said quietly. In that moment, Lieutenant Olivia Martinez spoke up from her position at the Special Operations Console. "Sir, I have an idea, but it's a one-way trip." Olivia was 30, with dark eyes that reflected a quick intelligence. She had been developing stealth technologies before the war. "Let's hear it, Lieutenant," Daniel said. "Our new stealth shuttles can approach without being detected. A small team could board their command ship while their attention is focused on the main battle. We can plant the quantum disruptors throughout their vessel." The quantum disruptors were small devices that created dimensional instabilities, useful for penetrating shields, but potentially catastrophic if activated inside a ship's power systems. "You'd never make it back," Daniel said, understanding. Immediately, Olivia nodded. "Yes, sir, but 12 million people would live." The Admiral hesitated only a moment. "Do it." In the chaos of battle, 5 small shuttles slipped away from the human fleet. Using technology that bent light and other sensors around them, they approached the massive Zentari command ship undetected. Olivia led the team of 20 volunteers. "Remember, our target is their power core. The quantum disruptors need to be placed at these key junctions." She pointed to the ship schematic they had developed from earlier battles. They docked silently against the Zentari ship's hull, using cutting tools to create an entrance. Inside, they split into 5 teams, each heading for different critical systems. Olivia's team moved toward the main power core, avoiding Zentari crew when possible, using quick, silent takedowns when not. Years of studying Zentari ship layouts from battle debris had prepared them well. "We're in position," she reported, as her team reached the massive chamber housing the power core. Beginning placement of disruptors. The small devices attached to the power conduits, their lights blinking as they synchronized with each other. Once activated, they would create a cascading failure that would tear the ship apart from the inside. "All teams report placement complete," came the update in Olivia's earpiece. "Awaiting your command." She took a deep breath, knowing what came next. "Activate all disruptors on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark." The devices activated simultaneously, their purple energy fields expanding to connect with each other. The effect was immediate. Alarms began to sound throughout the ship as power fluctuations cascaded through the systems. Olivia's final transmission to the fleet was calm. "Mission accomplished, Admiral. Make it count." The explosion started. From within the Zentari command ship, a blinding flash of purple-tinged energy that expanded outward. The Starhammer weapon, still charging, became unstable as its power systems failed. The resulting chain reaction spread to nearby Zentari ships, their own power cores resonating with the dimensional disruption. From the bridge of the Vanguard, Admiral Daniels watched as half the Zentari fleet went dark, disabled by the power surge that had jumped from ship to ship through their linked shield systems. "All ships press the advantage," he ordered, his voice tight with emotion, for the team that had sacrificed themselves. The battle that followed was unlike anything seen in Zentari history. The defeat at Alpha Centauri sent shockwaves through the Zentari Empire. For the first time in their 3,000 years of expansion, they had not only failed to conquer a species, but had been driven back with heavy losses. On the imperial capital, World, Supreme Executor Krastul faced an angry Senate. The Grand Chamber, with its high ceilings and ancient stone pillars, echoed with raised voices. 37 warships lost," shouted one senator, his blue skin dark with anger. "The cost of this war is now greater than our last 10 conquests combined." Another senator stood. "And for what? A few planets with limited resources? This makes no sense." Krastul raised his hands for silence. His once bright eyes had dimmed, and his skin had paled further with stress. "War Master Thulgrak has been removed from command for his unauthorized use of the Starhammer. Admiral Vikra will now lead our forces." Admiral Vikra stepped forward. Unlike most Centauri officials who wore ornate robes, she was dressed in a simple military uniform. She had spent the days since Alpha Centauri studying every detail of the battle. "Honored senators," she began, her voice calm but firm. "I must speak truth, even if it is difficult to hear. These humans do not break. Each defeat only strengthens their resolve. She activated a holographic display showing battle statistics. Our forces have superior technology, superior numbers, and 3 millennia of military doctrine. Yet in just 1 year, the humans have adapted our own shield technology and developed effective counters to our weapons. The Senate chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. I believe, Vikra continued carefully, that continuing this war will cost the Empire more than we can afford, not just in ships and resources, but in our standing among other species. If humans can defeat us, others may be inspired to try. On Earth, despite the victory at Alpha Centauri, the human coalition faced the reality that they could not win a prolonged conflict against the full might of the Centauri Empire. Too many colonies had been lost, too many lives sacrificed. President Laura Kelly sat in the war room with her advisors. The wall screens showed the status of all human forces. Too many red indicators where ships had been lost, too many yellow warnings where supplies were running critical. The victory at Alpha Centauri gives us a strong position, said Defense Secretary Alan Parker. But we all know we can't keep this up indefinitely. Laura nodded. Then we use this position of strength to seek peace. She turned to a man sitting quietly at the end of the table. Ambassador Ryan Cooper, I'm sending you to the Centauri capital. Ryan was 50, with salt and pepper hair and a thoughtful face. He had been studying Centauri culture since first contact. Madam President, the Centauri have never negotiated with a species they considered inferior. They may simply execute me. That's a risk we have to take, Laura replied. But you won't go empty-handed. Ambassador Cooper arrived at the imperial capital in a small ship under a flag of truce. He was immediately brought before the Senate, where he faced the assembled Centauri leadership. Supreme Executor Krastul looked down at the human with barely concealed disdain. You come before us after your attack at Alpha Centauri. Do you bring your surrender? Ryan shook his head. No, Supreme Executor, I bring understanding. He activated a data device he had brought. It displayed images from human history, wars, battles, and conflicts going back thousands of years. You are not the first to try to conquer us, Ryan told the assembled senators. We have been fighting ourselves for millennia. War is not an exceptional state for humans. It is our crucible. The images showed how humans had progressed from simple weapons to nuclear arms, from tribal conflicts to global wars. Each time we fight, we adapt. Each time we suffer, we innovate. Ryan's voice grew stronger. We do not wish to fight you, but make no mistake. If forced to choose between submission and extinction, we will fight until either we are victorious or nothing remains of either side. He shared data from human battles against the Centauri, showing how quickly humans had adapted their tactics and technology. This war has cost you 37 capital ships so far. Your analysts can calculate how many more you will lose if it continues. Ryan paused, letting the implications sink in. We offer peace instead, recognition of our sovereignty and mutual non-aggression. The Centauri, a species that had evolved through careful calculation and measured responses, could not comprehend the human willingness for mutual destruction. After 3 days of deliberation, the Imperial Senate voted to recognize human sovereignty. The first time in Centauri history that a military campaign was abandoned before complete victory. In the peace treaty that followed, both sides established buffer zones and non-aggression pacts. The Centauri's assessment of their greatest mistake became required study at their war academy. We judged the humans by their technology and numbers, not by their spirit. We assumed that because they could not win, they would not fight. We were wrong.